Thank you, Dean Smoots, and thanks as well to the Extension staff and instructors. Welcome, family, friends, and graduates. This is your day. But before I tell you about my 50 years with Mickey Mouse, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could just give me a couple of hand claps if you've ever been to a Disneyland park anywhere in the world. Okay. So if you had met me 50 years ago, during the first year of my Disney career, it would have been at Disneyland. And I would have helped you and 9 others into a little canal boat on an attraction called Storybook Land. And once you were safely seated, I would have asked you to please keep your hands and arms inside the boat. And then I would have begun my very well-rehearsed narration, and it was something like this. Welcome to Storybook Land, everyone. My name is Peggy, and we're on board the Katrina. Together, we're going to relive some of the most famous fairy tales of all time. So look and listen very carefully. And as we entered that miniature world through the mouth of Monstro the whale, you would have seen that everyone aboard was enchanted and ready to let the stories unfold. Now, I had a slightly different perspective because I repeated that journey 32 times a day, 160 times a week, 2,560 times that first summer. So I knew what was coming, but I found that familiarity very comforting. I really loved that attraction, the tranquility of drifting along on the water, spending quiet time with a handful of guests, marveling at the exquisite detail of the miniature architectural sets and the artfully crafted topiary. I might have stayed on Storybook Land a long, long time, but my heart got in the way. I fell in love. And in order to see where that relationship might lead, I needed to transfer out of Fantasyland into Tomorrowland, to an attraction that terrified me, the Matterhorn bobsleds. So gone was that leisurely pace of Storybook Land. Here, we dispatched bobsleds every 17 seconds. And we could bring the entire mountain to a full stop if we weren't paying attention to every situation. That was a lot of pressure for a Storybook Land girl. But I survived, and I came to really love the challenge. And the love affair survived, too. We're still together after 50 years. So you see, I had some very early experience with the good things that can come from leaving your comfort zone. But, you know, I never really had a plan. In fact, I've often referred to my 50 years with Disney as my accidental career. How else could I explain how I, who began my Disney life on Storybook Land, guiding a canal boat through the mouth of Monstro the whale, whose favorite classes in college were Celtic mythology, Indian lit, art of the North American Indian, and geography of Southwest Asia, would cap my Disney career 5 decades later as the creative leader of a team of nearly 50 very talented, mostly French, Imagineers in a country whose language I could barely speak. Perhaps accidental isn't exactly the best word to describe my 50 years with Disney. Enriching, challenging, even enchanted might be better. But the thread that runs through all these years is this. I have been curious, and I worked hard. And lucky me, my curiosity and hard work have been rewarded at nearly every turn by the people I've met, by the experiences I've had, and the lessons I've learned. So maybe we'll call this my curious career. And if you are curious and hardworking and brave, I believe your efforts will be equally rewarding. If you're just starting out, or maybe a bit farther down your career path, making course corrections along the way, I have a little secret to share. Sometimes the thing you think you are preparing yourself for does not turn out the way you expected. Sometimes you may be disappointed. Maybe you'll even be really discouraged. But here's the good news. I believe that if you do your very best, if you truly enjoy your work, if you keep pushing yourself to learn more and do more, if you listen to your heart, if you stay open to possibilities, amazingly good things are bound to happen. Curiously, they did for me. So let me back up a bit to 1965. Remember when I was perched on that canal boat, earning $1.98 an hour, taking those wonderfully exotic classes? I had no idea where all that would lead in terms of a career. I certainly did not imagine that a dozen years later, I would be leading the Walt Disney Imagineering story research effort to capture 40,000 years of communications history to complement author Ray Bradbury's narrative outline for Spaceship Earth, the premier attraction at Epcot at Walt Disney World. Sometimes opportunities just appeared, serendipity at its best. But let me be clear, it wasn't all enchantment. There were setbacks and disappointments and detours along the way. For example, I did not imagine that my 3 failed attempts to become the Disneyland ambassador in my early Disneyland days would lead to a role in the 1969 press conference to announce the first phase of Walt Disney World. But all those ambassador interviews had introduced me to a dozen key decision makers who decided to include me in that event. Nor had I expected that seeing the press conference site set in the middle of 27,000 acres of raw Florida swampland would compel me to travel across country to my first salaried position in Disney's first themed destination resort. But it did. I did not imagine that a 1972 reorganization of Walt Disney World staff would dash my dream of becoming an operations supervisor in the Magic Kingdom, nor that my subsequent reassignment as a convention coordinator would lead instead to a world of meeting planning, the foundation just 5 years later for a role back in California at Walt Disney Imagineering to focus on planning Epcot by hosting conferences on energy, agriculture, food production, good health in America, and communications, and working with a host of remarkable people, exceptional Disney artists and storytellers like Herbie Ryman, John Hench, and Mark Davis, so many incredibly talented colleagues, creative leaders like Disney legend and former editor of the Daily Bruin, Marty Sklar, and our esteemed Epcot advisors, people like author Alex Haley, filmmaker Joseph Mankiewicz, and scientists and marine explorers like Dr. Robert Ballard and Dr. Sylvia Earle. So lucky me, 20 years into my Disney career, I had been an attraction hostess, a supervisor of guest activities, a convention coordinator, a meeting planner, a story researcher, and a show producer. I had seen monumental projects spring from the imagination of talented designers and rise from the ground through the talents of architects, engineers, and project managers. Now what? Well, after the opening of Epcot in 1982, I found myself in meetings with more Disney dreamers and doers. They spoke of ambitious and groundbreaking projects, but they spoke in a language I didn't understand. It certainly wasn't the language of Shakespeare nor the poetic prose of Ray Bradbury. It was a code of IRR and NPV, of hurdle rates and target investments. I was baffled, but I was curious. So I consulted knowledgeable friends who informed me that that was the language of finance, and I knew that to crack the code, I would need to immerse myself in that alien world. I sent away for the keys to the kingdom, the 100-page tome known as the UCLA Extension Catalog. And so I began an odyssey of learning that would engage and beguile me for the next 22 years. I started small. Principles of Accounting 1A on Saturdays, then Principles of Accounting 1B, and then the prize, Elements of Business Finance. But by then, I was hooked, and many more classes followed. Marketing, real estate financial analysis, business economics, consumer behavior, and a slew of real estate classes just in case things at work took a bad turn. Now, week after week, year after year, I learned new concepts, explored bodies of knowledge, and developed capacities I didn't even know I had. Time and again, the UCLA Extension program enriched me, and I'm sure you will find it will do the same for you, providing intellectual stimulation and very practical know-how. In fact, sometimes my greatest thrill was to find a very practical application for a concept I had learned just the night before. So thank you, matrix math. Thank you, time value of money. Now, I do wish I had been more diligent in my studies related to conversational French. At the time, I just thought it would be nice to be able to pronounce correctly items I might find on a fancy menu. I never imagined that as I approached my 45th year with Disney, I would be asked to move to Disneyland Paris to lead our Imagineering team. And believe me, a better command of French would have come in very handy. But here again, UCLA made my experience, my 5 years in France, richer than I could have imagined. Shortly after my arrival in Paris, a call came out of the blue inviting me to attend a dinner with 12 strangers, a UCLA tradition that dated back to 1968, honored and practiced by thousands of UCLA alumni around the world. Now, I have to say that as useful, as challenging, and as rewarding as all my UCLA extension classes had been, I had never really felt a part of a community. Mine was a commuter's educational experience, and maybe yours has been too. But on that evening, I began to appreciate the worldwide reach of UCLA. In that cozy Parisian apartment surrounded by strangers, I began to see the power of an academic community that welcomes you wherever you are in the world, that stimulates you and keeps you connected. I made UCLA friends that evening whom I hope to have in my life forever. We can feel that connection here today. We can celebrate it tomorrow. We can share it with others wherever we go as we continue our curious journeys and as we contribute to the brave and brilliant spirit that defines and binds Bruins everywhere. Armed with your new UCLA certificates, your journeys are just about to unfold. I'm confident that you'll be so glad you took the time and effort to acquire new skills, fresh insights, and a network of friends and colleagues to cheer you on. My curious journey continues as well, and the uncharted waters ahead are all new to me. Perhaps great, dark, and scary monsters lurk in the deep. As a former storybook girl, I can't help but think I'm about to encounter a whale that goes by the name retirement. But let me tell you, I know a thing or two about preparing for curious adventures, and UCLA Extension will always be a part of that. And as you face the dark and scary monsters, the mysteries of your future, I hope you will let your curiosity drive you to unknown places. Let your courage give you the strength to leave your comfort zone, to pursue your dreams, to fill your life with interesting people, to follow your heart, even if it means scaling the Matterhorn. And don't forget, please keep your hands and arms inside the boat. It's always good advice. Thank you.
Great job. Peggy, thank you so much for those words of encouragement and inspiration for our graduates. I am honored at this time to give you this 2016 UCLA Extension Professional Achievement Award.